Order, please. I'll call upon the Premier now to present a new member to the House, please.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to present to you and to all members of the House the newly elected member for the electoral district of Chester St. Margaret's. The honourable member has taken the oath, signed the roll, and now exercises her claim to take her seat.
Thank you. Certainly welcome the honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's on behalf of all members, and ask her to take her seat, and hope she enjoys taking part in the proceedings here. Congratulations. Thank you. Order, please. Call upon the Honourable Deputy Premier for an introduction.
And Ken, yes, indeed. Mr. Speaker, it's a great honor today to welcome two very special guests in the East Gallery. And I'd like to introduce to the House the Honourable Member for South Shore, St. Margaret's, and the MP for that area, Mr. Gerald Keddy, and the husband of the new member of the House, Mr. Speaker. And at the other end of that row, Mr. Speaker, we have Mr. Ken Stretch, who is known by many people in this House, a former colleague of mine. Back in 1978, we came into the House. I have former cabinet minister, and now retired and living the life of a retiree. So welcome to you both.
So welcome our special guests to the gallery today, and hope they enjoy the proceedings. I'd also at this time like to take the opportunity to welcome and to introduce the two new deputy speakers. They've just been presented for this session. The honourable member for Pictou West for the official opposition, and the honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park for the Liberal Party. And I ask them to rise and receive the welcome of the House, please. Certainly looking forward to working with these two new members and their new duties. The late debate for this evening was submitted by the honourable member for Digby Annapolis. Therefore, be resolved, the members of this House demand the Premier act immediately and substantially to protect Nova Scotians from the high cost of heating their homes this winter. Be debated this evening at 6 p.m. Begin the day routine presenting reading petitions. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a petition, the operative clause of which is that we, the undersigned residents of CBRM, request the Government of Nova Scotia to remove by September 30th, 2005, the 15% tax on home heating oil. Mr. Speaker, it is signed by 7,485 residents, primarily of North Sydney, but also the surrounding area. I have affixed my signature.
Petition is tabled. Honourable member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a petition on behalf of the number of residents in the Tony River area of Pictou County, and it's the Little River Bridge at Tony Mills. And the petition reads that to urge the Nova Scotia Provincial Government and Department of Transportation to make funding available and to replace the condemned Little Tony River Bridge on the Carmichael Road, closed to traffic since May the 1st, 2003, with a new bridge structure. And it's signed by 308 residents of the area, and I too have affixed my signature.
Thank you. Petition is tabled. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to bring the Assembly's attention to the West, I was going to say wing, West Gallery. I would like to introduce you to one of my 7 sisters. She's here to take... she's here to take care of me, but she's one of Wayne's constituents, so... Anyway, I'd like to introduce my sister, Lorena Tucker. Give her a warm welcome.
Certainly welcome the all-member sister here today, and I'm sure she'll keep a close eye on them. Any further petitions? Presenting reports of committees. Table reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture, and Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a number of District Health Authorities' annual reports. The Cape Breton District Health Authorities 2004-2005 annual report, the Guys-Perwanigan Health Authorities 2004-2005 annual report, the Colchester East Hants Health Authorities 2004-2005 annual report, the South Shore Health Authorities 2004-2005 annual report, the Annapolis Valley Health Authorities 2004-2005 annual report, the annual report of the Psychiatric Facilities Review Board for 2002-2003, and I believe I mentioned the Capital Health report, Mr. Speaker, but after doing so many, I forget.
Or table. Statements by ministers. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand in my place today to publicly thank former Halifax Citadel MLA Danny Graham for his public service and earnest commitment to making Nova Scotia a better place to live, work, and raise a family. As I noted on the day of his announcement, Danny Graham has brought great energy and great sincerity to his party, his constituency, and his province throughout his term as leader of the Liberal Party, through an election campaign, and while carrying out his responsibilities as MLA. While we do not share the same politics, we found numerous areas where we could agree or at least compromise and improve upon government policies and legislation. I know all in this legislature would agree that Mr. Graham had a genuine respect for this House and for his colleagues in this House. His gentle demeanor and command of the law allowed for cooperation and progress on many areas of importance to Nova Scotians. Marian Wright Edelman, a passionate children's rights activist in the United States, said, "Education is for improving the lives of others and for leaving your community and world better than you found it." I believe the same can be said for public life and for Mr. Graham's contribution during his time in government. On behalf of my caucus and indeed all Nova Scotians, I wish Mr. Graham well as he returns to the private sector, hopefully finding some relief from the pressures of public life and more time to spend with his wife Sheila, their sons Patrick, Andrew, and Colin. May this be a positive new chapter in their lives.
Thank you. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join with the Premier and the members of his caucus, and on behalf of our own caucus, to extend to Mr. Graham our thanks. I believe that over the time that he had to serve in this House, and in fact in the run-up, because we should remember there was a period of time when he was working outside of the House on behalf of his party, in his capacity as leader. I believe that he served this House with distinction. He served his constituents with great passion, and I believe that the House and the province of Nova Scotia is better off as a result of those contributions. I would also, on behalf of my caucus, like to extend a special thank you to the members of his family who allowed him the opportunity to be able to make those contributions, for which we are all grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Recognize the Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honored to have the opportunity today to speak and tribute to Danny Graham on behalf of the entire Liberal caucus. My remarks are based on my experience with Danny, first as a supporter, then as a colleague, and finally as a friend. When Danny entered public life, he brought with him high expectations. We had high expectations for him, and he for us. He had a fresh approach and a belief that life could be better for Nova Scotians and that government could be reformed. He has the ability to make people feel stronger and hopeful, rare talents in a politician. One of Danny's biggest assets as leader was that he listened. He solicited the views of others and paid attention. While the public perception is that many politicians can make you feel that they're looking over your shoulder for the next hand to shake, he never felt that way with Danny. And he has passion. One might disagree with him on issues such as VLTs or special education, but one could never question the passion and belief of his position. And sometimes that position was hard to sell, no matter how much passion was behind it. It is not easy to tell voters in the province that you cannot afford a tax cut, as he did during the 2003 election campaign. The truth hurts, and sometimes it costs you votes. And there were missteps along the way, Mr. Speaker. You yourself have sometimes had to remind Danny he was asking a question, not making a summation. And indeed, on many occasions, I think he may have called you Your Honor. There are several men in this chamber who know how difficult it is to be a political leader under the very best of circumstances. And although it is a very important job, it is not the most important job in one's life. A good leader leads by example. And for us, Danny showed leadership when he made the choice 2 years ago to put his full energy and support behind Sheila and his family. Lots of people talk about family values. Danny lives them. I want to conclude on this note. It was Danny's commitment to public policy and broader issues of justice which brought him to politics. Ironically, he leaves politics to pursue these same goals, and we wish him the very best. To Sheila, Patrick, Andrew, and Colin, I want to say thank you for sharing your husband and your father with us. We appreciate your sacrifice, and I know that all my colleagues in this chamber want to wish you the very best in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I'm sure on behalf of all members, we all wish Danny and his family nothing but the very best in the future. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The disturbing images of yet another natural disaster have traveled from across the world to our living rooms. This time, as a result of an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.6 on the Richter scale, hit 95 kilometers northeast of the Pakistan capital of Islamabad. The number who have died as a result is estimated now at a possible 40,000. However, the United Nations reminds us that some 4 million people are affected, including 2 million who have lost their homes. The United Nations also warns that what may follow, measles, cholera, and other diseases, could add to the already frightening death toll. We have today lowered the flags at Province House to half-mast out of respect and in shared grief for this horrific tragedy. While relief efforts are pouring in from around the world, many still suffer, awaiting medical aid or essentials like food, water, immunization, and shelter. Simply trying to reach affected citizens in rural parts of this mountainous region is adding to the task of just trying to attend to the mammoth number injured and killed. Our province, on behalf of all of our citizens, has committed today to a donation of $100,000 to be channeled through the Canadian Red Cross Society. The Society's most urgent request is for cash to provide the survivors of the disaster with food, shelter, first aid, basic health care, and medical supplies. The federal government has committed to helping reunite close family members of Canadian citizens and permanent residents who are seriously and personally affected by the earthquake, taking a similar approach to the crisis following the tsunami in Southeast Asia. Nova Scotia is already home to many people from the South Asian region affected by this terrible disaster. We know there are more than 100 families from Pakistan alone in our province. While we have a feeling of helplessness, when again watching from afar a tragedy of such immense proportions, we too want to lend a hand. In concert with the federal government's efforts, we will also work to assist those in the earthquake-devastated region of South Asia to help reunite those people with their families. Our nominee program is open to people who have strong community ties with the province, people who have been affected by this disaster and who have close family ties in Nova Scotia are welcome to apply through our nominee program. To add more than simple words of welcome, we will also waive the application fees. As well, these files will be dealt with on a priority basis. The innocent face of the 5-year-old girl found after being trapped for nearly 100 hours is a small victory for rescuers and residents, mindful of the future for this region where, it seems, according to those on the ground, children and women were affected in greater proportion. We pray for more miracles like this one as we continue to monitor the tragic images of entire villages lost and the schools filled with children simply buried under rubble, and as time runs short in the desperate attempt, many digging through the rubble with their bare hands to try to find more survivors. Mr. Speaker, after we hear from the opposition leaders, I would ask all members of this legislature to rise for a moment of silence and reflect on the devastation, the tens of thousands who have died, and on those who survived but must now wait for medical aid and emergency relief efforts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Recognize now Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to welcome the statement by the Premier. I think his words were entirely appropriate, and the actions of the government are, of course, entirely appropriate. As it happens, last evening I had a long conversation with a gentleman whose parents are still in Pakistan. He was explaining to me something about the geography of the place and the fact that they really fear that the real scope of the devastation won't be known for some time yet, and of course that the effects of the earthquake had also extended into areas of India as well. So this is obviously a matter of compassion on behalf of the government, and we appreciate it. So on behalf of our caucus, we'd like to associate ourselves with the statement made by the Premier.
Recognize all member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of our leader, Francis McKenzie, and on behalf of our entire caucus, certainly want to thank the Premier for making the statement here today, and certainly our entire caucus is saddened by the devastation that this earthquake has had on the people of Pakistan and the up to 40,000 lives that have been lost. Speaker, we know that residents of Pakistan have continually made up a large percentage of new Canadian citizens over the past number of years and have played an important role in the makeup of our Canadian fabric, and certainly pleased to learn that there's over 100 families in Nova Scotia that are of Pakistani descent. We want to commend the government for, at this time, choosing to waive the application fees under the nominee program, and we certainly hope that residents in the Pakistani area will be applying to become Nova Scotia citizens and Nova Scotia residents. We're also pleased that the government has contributed $100,000 to Canadian Red Cross. And, Mr. Speaker, when one looks at the global picture, Nova Scotia is quite a small player, but I think all Nova Scotians will be proud to see that in a time of need, our province is always prepared to give a helping hand. Mr. Speaker, while we may have our difference politically, I think all members recognize that as Nova Scotians, we are people that live in peace. We do not fear attack from outside forces. We do not fear civil war based on religious or ethnic grounds. We do not fear the natural disasters that are all too common in certain parts of the world. So let's take this opportunity to grieve for the lives that have been lost, for the families that have been devastated, but let us also once again take this opportunity to be thankful for the peace and the stability that we enjoy as Nova Scotians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Ask all members to rise for one moment of silence. Thank you. Please be seated. The member for Richmond on introduction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I would draw members' attention to the West Gallery, where we are joined today by a young gentleman. I'll call him young because he's the same age as me. But, Mr. Speaker, it's a gentleman that our caucus certainly looks forward to seeing much more of in the near future here in this House, and I would ask members to join me in welcoming the Liberal candidate for Halifax Citadel, Mr. Devin Maxwell.
So we welcome our special guests to the gallery today. Wish everyone well. Everyone. Government notice the motion. The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future date. I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the longest-serving member of this House, our Deputy Premier, started off his summer with upsetting news and had to quickly prepare for surgery to deal with the cancer doctors had found. And whereas not only is he back in his seat, he has returned to the job with a clean bill of health from his doctor and looks better than ever. Whereas it is thanks in large measure to this member's incredible efforts as government House Leader and positive working relationship with his counterparts across the floor that we have moved forward on so many legislative issues during this minority government. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of this legislature give a warm welcome, well, we've already done that, Mr. Speaker, to this valued member of government who has yet again shown that age is not a limiting factor when you have the strength, drive, and level of energy of a 20-year-old. And I seek waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Question waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day. I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this week, loyal listeners and viewers of the CBC welcome news that the National Broadcasting Corporation and its employees had ratified a new agreement and returned to the airwaves. And whereas the 2-month-long labor disruption was difficult for employees, their families, and the CBC, and left a void for audiences across Canada. And whereas the end of the lockout includes a return to duty of our own press gallery president and radio legislative correspondent, John LaRoche, as well as veteran CBC legislative correspondent Paul Withers, French correspondents Jean-Albert Maire and Madeleine Blaise-Morin. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the legislature thank both sides for coming back to the table and making some difficult decisions to ensure a successful outcome and for what was a very difficult situation for all. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the passing in 2004 of a loyal friend to this legislature, Mr. John Chataway, left a great void for the people of Chester St. Margaret's, including, of course, the need for a new provincial representative. And whereas while John left big shoes to fill, I believe he would have been pleased to see the field of enthusiastic and qualified candidates who put their names forward in the recent by-election. And whereas the new member for Chester St. Margaret's not only brings to this role enthusiasm, a love of politics, of her community, and of her family, she also brings over 15 years as an educator, experience in business, as well as a keen understanding of the needs of rural Nova Scotia. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the legislature give a warm welcome to the House of Assembly's new representative for Chester St. Margaret's, and thank all of those who took the brave step of placing their names forward for public office. And I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question waivers that agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities recently heard from women in this province about women's participation in municipal decision-making, and whereas women participate in decision-making as citizens, as government employees, and as elected officials, and whereas municipal councillors of Nova Scotia and the UNSM Board have considered and accepted the recommendations of their Women and Local Government Project and will surely act upon these. Therefore, be it resolved that this House recognize and congratulate the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities on their support of increasing women's participation in many forms of government decision-making. I hereby request waiver and notice of passage without debate.
Question for waivers that agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hereby give notice on a future day to move the adoption of the final resolution. Whereas animal health and registered veterinary technologists have practiced in Canada for over 30 years as valuable professionals in the field of animal health and veterinary medicine, and whereas the number of veterinary technicians and membership in the Eastern Veterinary Technicians Association in Nova Scotia continues to grow. And whereas October 9th to 15th is Veterinary Technicians Week, we just got it, Mr. Speaker, in the province of Nova Scotia, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House recognize that veterinary technicians are important contributors to animal health and are to be commended for the work that they do. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers that agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Hants East on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the members of the House. I believe in both East and West galleries, Mr. Speaker, we have operating engineers, members of Local 721B, who are presently on strike at National Gypsum in Milford, and they're here today to draw attention to their plight, and I'd like them to stand and get the recognition of the House.
Thank you. We welcome our guests to the gallery. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future date that I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a beautiful exhibition of paintings celebrating the reconciliation and forgiveness of a group of World War II veterans opened at Province House yesterday and will remain on display until October 21st. And whereas this is a fitting tribute during the Year of the Veteran and the commemoration of the 60th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, to the peace and freedom secured as a result of the tragic sacrifices made by so many, and whereas the exhibition, at the end of the day, features veterans from Canada, Britain, and Germany, and was inspired by the Dinner of Reconciliation in Ortano, Italy, in 1998 when former combatants gathered for dinner, Ortano being the scene of heavy fighting in the Second World War. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this legislature thank artist Catherine Jones for sharing these tremendous images with us, and for the message of forgiveness her 21 paintings relay, and encourage all to experience the exhibition while housed in the legislature so that this enduring message is shared as widely as possible. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers that agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contraminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Canadians have been marking Women's History Month since October 1992, and whereas this year we remember the contributions of women in conflict and peace and the consequences of war for women, and whereas many Nova Scotia women have served Canada in conflict and in peace, in our armed forces, as medical support, as logistics support, in fact, in nearly every capacity. Therefore, be it resolved that this House recognize and applaud the contributions women have made for decades to the peace and freedoms Canadians enjoy today, and that we work to assure that the progress of women continues until the day we celebrate their true equality in Canada. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on introduction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a great pleasure that I introduce in your gallery, Mr. Speaker, Karen Haslam, who is the new provincial secretary for the provincial New Democratic Party. So you're going to see her around here a little bit from time to time, Mr. Speaker, and I think she's coming in to get a view of the House and what we do here. So I'd like to, on behalf of the House, welcome her and give her the approbation of the House.
Thank you. Certainly welcome our special gallery today. The Honourable Member Cole Harbour Eastern Passage on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the West Gallery, I wanted to recognize some members of the Nova Scotia Government and General Employees Union who are here with regard to the issue of the Shelburne facility. Mr. Francis Campbell, Mr. John Waters, Mr. Bill Slack, and also Robin McLean, Joan Jessam, and Linda Power are here as well from the union, and they can get the welcome of the House.
Certainly welcome our special guests to the gallery today. I'd like to bring the attention of the members to two guests who are seated in the Speaker's gallery today. One is a gentleman who's been here before, Speaker Bev Harrison from the New Brunswick House of Assembly. With Speaker Harrison today is a gentleman, his name is Mpiwa Lamine. Mpiwa is a member of the Parliament of Swaziland. He's visiting Canada and the Maritime provinces, particularly he's been New Brunswick, PEI, now Nova Scotia. He's been escorted by Mr. Harrison. Of particular interest, Mpiwa is a member of Parliament, as I said, in Swaziland, but he's also a member of the royal family of Swaziland. I believe he's a relative of the king. Anyway, Mpiwa has been here. He's visited with myself and with the clerks, and he's been touring the legislature, and he's, I guess, doing a review of the procedures and rules, the way we do things here in Eastern Canada. And I'd asked Mpiwa and Speaker Harrison to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House, please. Welcome to Nova Scotia and to Canada, Mpiwa. I hope to see you back again. Thank you. Any further government notice of motion? Introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Recover Damages and Healthcare Costs from Manufacturers of Tobacco.
The Honourable Minister of Justice begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Recover Damages and Healthcare Costs from Manufacturers of Tobacco.
Bill 221, entitled An Act to Recover Damages and Healthcare Costs from Manufacturers of Tobacco.
Or this bill be read a second time in a future date. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill called An Act to Delay the Application for Rate Increases by Nova Scotia Power.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Delay the Application for Rate Increases by Nova Scotia Power.
Bill 222, entitled An Act to Delay the Application for Rate Increases by Nova Scotia Power.
Or this bill be read a second time in a future date. The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to amend Chapter 217 of the Revised Statutes Act of 1989, the Income Tax Act.
Now, member for Timberlea Prospect begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to amend Chapter 217 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Income Tax Act.
Bill 223, entitled An Act to amend Chapter 217 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Income Tax Act.
This bill will be read a second time at a future date. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if I might introduce a few people in the gallery who are here with the introduction of this bill today. Mr. Speaker, there's 4 people in the East Gallery here today who have been instrumental in the bill moving forward that we're putting forward today. And I'd ask them to rise and receive the welcome of the House. Dr. Robert Strang from Smoke Free Nova Scotia, Meg McCallum from the Canadian Cancer Society, Nova Scotia, Sharon McIntosh, Capital Health, and Alan McAvoy, Heart and Stroke Foundation. And I would ask all members to give them the warm welcome of the House. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 12 of the Acts of 2002, the Smoke Free Places Act.
The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture, responsible for health promotion, begs leave to introduce an act to amend Chapter 12 of the Acts 2002, the Smoke Free Places Act.
Bill 224, entitled An Act to amend Chapter 12 of the Acts of 2002, the Smoke Free Places Act.
Or this bill be read a second time at a future date. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a bill entitled An Act to amend Chapter 214 of the Revised Statutes of 1989, the Human Rights Act.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to amend Chapter 214 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Human Rights Act.
Bill 225, entitled An Act to amend Chapter 214 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Human Rights Act.
Or this bill be read a second time at a future date. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to amend Chapter 380 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Utilities Act.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to amend Chapter 380 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Utilities Act.
Bill 226, entitled An Act to amend Chapter 380 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Utilities Act.
Or this bill be read a second time at a future date. Notice of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on September 29th, Premier John Hamm announced that he will step aside from his position once the Progressive Conservative Party has chosen his successor. And whereas on October 7th, former Liberal Party leader Danny Graham resigned his seat in the legislature. And whereas both the Premier and Mr. Graham have provided the kind of principled and dedicated public service that earns the respect of Nova Scotians from all political viewpoints, therefore be it resolved that the House recognize the positive contribution made by Premier John Hamm and Mr. Danny Graham to public life in our province, and thank their families and supporters for making it possible for these two leaders to foster confidence in our democratic system of government. Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Question waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. Now, member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice, and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas strip mining has been called remediation mining, and whereas strip mining is also being referred to as surface mining, and whereas Bulledry Island is a jewel in the Bedore Lakes with its pristine environment and second-to-none community environment, therefore be it resolved that this House recognize the damage this proposed strip mining will cause to this jewel of Bulledry Island and petition the Minister of Natural Resources to cancel any and all permits for strip mining on Bulledry Island. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Hearing no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas approximately 95 workers at the National Gypsum, Milford, Dutch Settlement, Carroll's Corner Quarry, and the Burnside Loading Facility have been on strike for nearly 10 weeks now. And whereas the employees' collective agreement expired on April 21st of this year, and whereas the operating engineers are trying to improve their pension plan, job security, compulsory overtime, layoff, recall, and safety. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature encourages the management and employees teams to get back to the table so a solution can be found to resolve this very difficult situation. And Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice.
Question waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contraminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pearl Harbor Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be doing this resolution in something that sounds like French and translating it into English afterwards. Oui. Monsieur le Président, à une date ultérieure, j'ai l'intention de proposer l'adoption de la résolution suivante. Attendu que les citoyens de la baie Sainte-Marie avec besoin de soins continus sont souvent placés dans la maison de soins à l'extérieur de leur communauté, et attendu que les personnes francophones ne peuvent pas recevoir des services en français dans plusieurs de ces communautés. Et attendu que le bureau de direction de Ville Acadien, une maison de soins située à Métégan, voudrait ajouter 10 lits pour continuer à bien servir la population de la baie Sainte-Marie chez elle. Qu'il soit résolu que ce gouvernement travaille avec le bureau de direction de Ville Acadien pour s'assurer que la population acadienne de la région de la baie Sainte-Marie peut recevoir les soins continus dans leur propre communauté. Monsieur le Président, je demande l'adoption de cette résolution sans préavis et sans débat. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the residents of Baie Sainte Marie area who require continuing care are often placed in nursing homes outside of their community. And whereas French-speaking people cannot receive services in French in many of these communities. And whereas the Board of Directors of Ville Acadien, a nursing home located in Métégan, would like to add 10 beds to continue serving the population of Baie Sainte Marie area in their own area. Therefore, be it resolved that this government work with the Board of Directors of Ville Acadien to ensure that the population of Baie Sainte Marie can receive long-term care in their own community. And I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? Here, no. The notice is tabled. The honourable member for Richmond.
Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of following resolution. Whereas 2005 has been designated Year of the Veteran in Nova Scotia, whereas all Nova Scotians should remember and honor those who fought so bravely and contributed in so many ways on and off the battlefield, whereas this is an opportunity for all Nova Scotians to recognize the sacrifices and hardship of our veterans and current armed forces for their great duty and service to all Nova Scotians. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly thank our veterans for their service to Canada and recognize that every year is a year to honor our veterans. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the following resolution. Whereas the Bondarenko family has been waiting in Bermuda for the Federal Department of Immigration and Citizenship to approve their application for a work visa and permanent residency since the early summer. And whereas Vitaly Bondarenko has been approved as a candidate for the Nova Scotia nominee program as a highly skilled person. And whereas the Bondarenko family and the province of Nova Scotia are awaiting approval from the Federal Department of Immigration so that the Bondarenko family may return to Nova Scotia where their friends and business associates await them. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly calls upon the Federal Department of Immigration and Citizenship to take all the steps necessary to facilitate the return of the Bondarenko family to the province in the near future. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Safe Harbor Metropolitan Community Church was established in Halifax in 1991 as a member congregation of the Metropolitan Community Churches, the world's largest Christian denomination with a positive, affirming ministry to the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered communities. And whereas Safe Harbor Church, its pastor, Reverend Darlene Young, and its members have provided valuable services to this community, including operating for the past 8 years the Manna for Health Food Bank, which assists people living with HIV, AIDS, and other life-threatening illnesses. And whereas Safe Harbor Church recently celebrated its 14th anniversary on September 25th, 2005, with a special service attended by Reverend Elder Dr. Troy D. Perry, the founder and moderator of the Metropolitan Community Churches. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulates Safe Harbor Metropolitan Community Church on the occasion of its 14th anniversary and extend its appreciation for the desperately needed services which the church has provided over that time and will continue to provide. And Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Women's Institute of the African United Baptist Association, known as the AUBA, is the governing body for all women's groups and organizations within the AUBA, and continuously strive to promote Christian hope and charity within the church, home, and community. Whereas the AUBA Women's Institute is honoring 40 women from the Ladies Auxiliary on October the 15th, 2005. Whereas Sister Rosetta Beals has been recognized for 50 years of continuous service to the AUBA Women's Institute through the local Ladies Auxiliary. Therefore, it be resolved that members of this House of Assembly congratulate Sister Rosetta Beals and honor her dedication and service to her church and community. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Guysborough, Sheet Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas it is with great sadness that the people of Canso recognize Pat Figier, who passed away August 14th, for his many contributions to his community. And whereas Pat Figier will always be remembered for being an advocate for the fishery and the town of Canso. And whereas Pat Figier was a passionate man who worked tirelessly as voice for local fishermen and was a pillar of the community who will be greatly missed. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House express our appreciation for all that Pat Figier accomplished in his short 51 years, and we extend our deepest condolences to the Figier family and friends. So, Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the members of International Union of Operating Engineers Local 721B at National Gypsum's Milford Quarry and Burnside Loading Facility were forced on the picket line on August 10th of this year. And whereas the union, because of the greed of National Gypsum, were forced into this situation in order to fight for better pensions, seniority rights, and living wages, Mr. Speaker. And whereas this international company is mining one of our precious natural resources with little or no regard for Nova Scotian workers. Therefore, be it resolved that this House insists National Gypsum go back to the table for meaningful negotiations with Local 721B of International Union of Operating Engineers to get a collective agreement to give these workers the dignity they deserve. I seek waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Question waiver, is it agreed? Oh, I hear a no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Clare.
You don't want a labour agreement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the devastation caused by Hurricane Katrina to the southern state has been a shock to many across North America. And whereas in an effort to help our neighbors to the south, Canada sends 1,000 members of our Navy and Coast Guard to help with the cleanup of this disaster. And whereas members of our armed forces delivered desperately needed supplies, cleaned up debris left by the storm, while our Navy divers and Coast Guard workers continued to raise sunken ships, clearing shipping channels, and repairing navigational beacons, ensuring the ports are able to reopen for business. Therefore, it be resolved that members of this House recognize the commitment and sacrifice made by the crews of HMCS Athabascan, HMCS Ville de Quebec, HMCS Toronto, and our Coast Guard ship Sir William Alexander. Mr. Speaker, I would ask waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas September represented Continuing Care Month across Nova Scotia, and whereas Shoreham Village in Chester provides professional care and comfort to seniors in need, and whereas Continuing Care Month celebrates all of the organizations, staff, and volunteers who dedicate themselves every day to caring for citizens in need, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House thank the compassionate staff and volunteers in continuing care, as well as the many Nova Scotians who are the recipients of their hard work and dedication. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. Now, member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas since Adelaide Hunter Hoodless' 18-month-old son died of drinking contaminated milk in 1897, rural women have organized to provide a forum to better themselves and their communities. Whereas Women's Institutes were created directly from this beginning, and whereas October 14, 2005 marks the 25th anniversary of the 9 Mile River Homemakers Women's Institute, therefore be resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate the members of the 9 Mile River Women's Institute branch for their contributions to their community over the years and wish them success for the future. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Bob Eamon of Annapolis Royal has been an active and well-respected community member in the town, serving in many capacities, including a prominent businessman, deputy mayor, and fire chief. And whereas Bob often put his safety and well-being at risk responding to the needs of others as a volunteer firefighter with the Annapolis Royal Volunteer Fire Department. And whereas Bob is being recognized by his peers at the Annapolis Royal Volunteer Fire Department's annual banquet on November 5, 2005, for 55 years of active, outstanding service to the department and its community, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly extend our thanks and appreciation to Bob and his family for the many years of selfless giving. Mr. Speaker, ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas September represented Continuing Care Month across Nova Scotia, and whereas Evergreen Home for Special Care in Kentville provides professional care and comfort to seniors in need, and whereas Continuing Care Month celebrates all the organizations, staff, and volunteers who dedicate themselves every day to caring for citizens in need, therefore be resolved that all members of this House thank the compassionate staff and volunteers in continuing care, as well as the many Nova Scotians who are recipients of their hard work and dedication. I request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver? It's agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Shabakdale.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a stalwart of Nova Scotia politics, Mr. George Hawkins, passed away in September of this year at the age of 81. And whereas George Hawkins was universally known as a wonderful raconteur, as a well-motivated reformer, as having a genuine interest in all people, and as a treasured fellow citizen. And whereas his contribution to the serious debate of important public issues in Nova Scotia politics will long be remembered, therefore be it resolved that this House offers its sympathy to the family of the late George Hawkins, a man to be respected. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas for the past 15 years, Autumn House has been a beacon of hope in Cumberland County for women in need of safety. And whereas Autumn House has sheltered 1,600 women and children since its inception and provided counseling to hundreds of other men and women who have required assistance to end the cycle of violence. And whereas the work of the Cumberland Transition House Association has transformed the lives of many women through counseling, encouragement, and support, therefore be it resolved that members of this House congratulate Autumn House for their 15 years of service and recognize the vital services transition houses provide in our communities. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas there are 441 elected municipal members in 55 municipal units across the province of Nova Scotia, and whereas local government represented by talented, civic-minded citizens is essential to the conduct of good government, and whereas each year there is at least one councillor in each municipal unit who excels during the execution of his or her duties. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House acknowledge and congratulate contributions made by our municipal politicians within Nova Scotia and lend support to an effort by the Department of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations in conjunction with the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities in having each municipality present a Councillor of the Year award for the councillor in each municipal unit who makes an outstanding contribution during the performance of his or her duty. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Motion waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on September 21st, Nova Scotia became the first North American jurisdiction to install a lime dozer, a sophisticated remediation device at the West River near Sheet Harbour, and whereas this technology has been adopted from Norway and Sweden to distribute powdered limestone into rivers damaged by acid rain, and whereas reducing the acidity of such a river makes it more productive to salmon spawning and generally can lead towards restoring it to a healthier watercourse. Therefore, be it resolved that this House applaud the tremendous efforts put forth by the Atlantic Salmon Federation, community volunteers, their sponsors, and the Nova Scotia Salmon Association for making the Lime Dozer project on the West River a successful example of citizens working together to make positive change in our environment. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Just before I read the resolution, I'd like to draw the members' attention to the West Gallery for an introduction, if I could. We're joined today by Dr. Christopher Miller, who is a well-known community volunteer in Clayton Park and Rockingham area and works very tirelessly on the protection and preservation of the Blue Mountain, Birch Cove Lakes Crown lands. And I wonder if Chris would stand and receive the welcome of the House. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas September 29th was Can West Raise a Reader Day, where volunteers traded copies of the Chronicle Herald for a donation to literacy programs throughout Nova Scotia. And whereas literacy is the foundation of all education, and without the ability to read, day-to-day living can be a challenge. And whereas the number of individuals who are functionally illiterate is staggering, and this has a huge cost to our people and our province in terms of quality of life, therefore be it resolved that members of this House congratulate the contributors to Raise a Reader and acknowledge the contribution that literacy groups make to our province. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the following resolution. Whereas the musical talents which exist in Pictou County keep getting more and more attention all of the time, and whereas the latest example is J.D. Fortune, a native of Salt Springs, Pictou County, who won CBC Television's In Excess talent show this summer, after being involved in a rock band for 6 years. And whereas J.D. grew up listening to his grandfather sing and began performing at a very young age and worked as an Elvis impersonator for a few years, then as an entertainer and a writer of pop songs for television shows in Ontario, before performing at the Sky Dome in Toronto in front of 50,000 people. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House applaud J.D. Fortune for keeping Pictou County and Nova Scotia in the international music spotlight, while wishing him nothing but continued success. And I seek waiver of notice.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Tom and Lori Miller of Green Hill, Pictou County, have been chosen as recipients of the Nova Scotia Woodlot Owner of the Year Award for their commitment to sustainable forest management. And whereas the Millers practice selection harvesting on their woodlots at Green Hill, Pictou County, and Earltown, Colchester County, and are certified by the internationally recognized Forest Stewardship Council, or the FSC. And whereas their management practices include annual harvest limits, designating protected areas, improving wildlife habitat, and working to restore the Acadian forests that are native to our maritime region. Therefore, it be resolved that this Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate Tom and Lori Miller on being chosen as the Nova Scotia Woodlot Owner of the Year and in showing leadership in sustainable forest management now and for future generations. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Mr. Wilfred Jackson, born and raised in Halifax, has dedicated a great deal of his life to improving the lives of children and youth. And whereas Mr. Jackson has been involved with numerous organizations, including the YMCA, the Council of Canadian Children and Youth Care Associations, Nova Scotia Child and Youth Care Workers Association, the Dartmouth Boys and Girls Club, and the Provincial Task Force on the Family, to name but a few. And whereas Mr. Jackson has hired in 1980 as Executive Director of the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children, is now retiring after serving for 25 years. Therefore, it be resolved that members of this House of Assembly recognize and honor Mr. Jackson at the time of his retirement for his years of dedication and service to the youth and children of this province. And Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on September 22nd, 2005, the Cape Breton and Central Nova Scotia's Railway got a 5-year lease on life with the announcement of $10 million by Premier John Ham and the Minister of Energy, the Honourable Cecil Clark. And whereas this link for small business to mainland markets is fundamental for growth, stability, and prosperity. And whereas the 5-year agreement will give potential shippers the needed security to explore new ways of moving freight and product. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House acknowledge and thank Premier John Ham and Minister of Energy for fulfilling the provincial government's commitment to maintain this vital transportation link on Cape Breton Island. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice.
Request for waivers is agreed. I hear a no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a couple of introductions first.
Please, the honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, an introduction, then the resolution.
Thank you. In the Speaker's Gallery, I'd like to bring your attention to the councillor for HRM for Dartmouth Centre, District 5, Gloria McCluskey, and ask you to give her a warm welcome. And in the West Gallery, I'd like to ask Helen Fleet to stand. She's a very well-respected volunteer in the metro area, and we welcome her here this afternoon. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas last year, the Halifax YWCA provided over 3,200 bed nights to women in transition in its 16-bed facility, and whereas the YWCA placed a proposal to the Department of Community Services to provide the same level of services for 24 beds in a new location for the same amount of operational funding it received for operating 16 beds, and whereas the Department of Community Services chose to cut the operational funding, leaving the project unsustainable and forcing the YWCA to make the difficult decision to close its housing program effective November 1st, 2005. Therefore, be it resolved that the Minister of Community Services explain to Nova Scotian women who require transitional housing while dealing with challenges ranging from mental illness to leaving abusive relationships, why he and his department have allowed this vital service to disappear. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers that agreed. Here are no, several noes. The notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Finance on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to draw the attention of the House to the East Gallery. In the gallery is a Mr. Stephen Craig. He's the elected Conservative candidate at a very large convention in Sackville-Cobequid. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask him to rise and receive the warm welcome and the good wishes of the House.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes on introduction.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to address. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to address the audience's attention to the West Gallery to recognize a constituent of mine, Mr. Wilfred Isaacs, a very active community activist in my community, and I'd like to welcome him here today and have the pleasure of the attendance of the House.
To welcome our guest to the gallery today, the Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on introduction.
Yes, I'd also like to have an introduction, and I believe this introduction is of interest to all members of the House. In the West Gallery, we're joined today by Jen Bond, who is a former page of this House and is now the Vice President of Dalhousie Student Union. So she's here in her elected capacity today, and perhaps you'd like to rise, and we'll give you a warm welcome, Jen.
We welcome our guest today. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this past Victoria Day weekend, Philip Comeau took heroic measures to save an Amherst resident, Edward Maltby, from a burning apartment. And whereas Amherst Fire Chief Bill Crosman said Mr. Maltby, who is 73 years of age and disabled, would have likely perished if Mr. Comeau had not made the split-second decision he did and entered the burning structure. Whereas 3 other occupants residing in another apartment in the house, a mother and 2 small children, managed to make it to safety on their own. Therefore, be it resolved, all MLAs applaud the outstanding courage exemplified by Philip Comeau over the 2005 Victoria Day weekend and recognize him for what he is, a hero. Mr. Speaker, I respectfully request waiver of notice.
Question for waivers that agreed. All those in favor say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
Notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Uganda-Canadian Association of the Maritimes aims to provide assistance and fellowship for Canadians of Ugandan origin living in the Maritimes, and whereas the association also raises funds to assist with various humanitarian causes in Uganda, and whereas on October 8th the association held its annual fundraiser at St. Lawrence Parish Hall in Fairview to coincide with Ugandan Independence Day on October the 9th, therefore be it resolved that the House of Assembly congratulates the Ugandan Canadian Association of the Maritimes for its ongoing humanitarian fundraising efforts and wishes the association continued success in welcoming people of Ugandan origin to the Maritimes. And Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers that agreed. All those in favor say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Eastern Shore.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas September represented Continuing Care Month across Nova Scotia, and whereas the Birches in Musquodoboit Harbour provides professional care and comfort to seniors in need, and whereas Continuing Care Month celebrates all of the organizations, staff and volunteers who dedicate themselves every day to the caring for citizens in need. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House thank the compassionate staff and volunteers in continuing care, as well as the many more Nova Scotians who are the recipients of their hard work and dedication. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I introduce this resolution, I just want to make mention that the councillor representing...
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I introduce this resolution, I just want to make mention that the councillor for District 5, Central Dartmouth, is also the grandmother of the person mentioned in this resolution. So I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canada Games provides a positive environment that offers fulfillment, cultivates new friendships, and fosters leadership through development in sports. And whereas the competitive sports brings out the best in athletic achievement, both individually or working together as a team. And whereas this competitive environment of athletes, success is achieved through passion and commitment to the sport, and Hannah Vaughn proved this by winning gold in the women's K100, Mr. Speaker, the women's K1000, the K6000, the K2 1000, and winning silver in the women's K4 500. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly show their appreciation of Hannah Vaughn's outstanding athletic performance on behalf of all Nova Scotians.
Request for waiver?
Request waiver without and passage without.
All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable Minister of Human Resources.
That's you.
Human Resources. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canada Games in August may have ended, but the experience lasts a lifetime for its participants. Whereas Team Nova Scotia had 9 athletes from Lunenburg County: Natasha Baker, Stephen Keeping, Jenna Martin, Anthony Nessel, Krista Stockman, Ashley Wombold, all of Bridgewater, Nicole Larod from Blockhouse, Alex Legg from Mahone Bay, and Rebecca Reeves of New Ross. Whereas these athletes demonstrated extraordinary athleticism and teamwork in each of their sports and achieved many personal bests. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House congratulate these Lunenburg County athletes for their success on the national sporting stage and thank them for their extraordinary performances that make us on the home team so proud of them. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in March 1999, the Tory leader, in a speech outlining the Conservative position on Cisco, stated, First and foremost, Cisco workers must be fairly and reasonably compensated for their years of service. And whereas 4 years later, in June of 2003, the Premier stated in a speech in Sydney, I can't protect Cisco jobs, but I promise to protect the steelworkers. And whereas in the Conservative election platform of 2003, the Premier was quoted as saying, we will not abandon the Cisco workers or their families. Therefore, be it resolved that this Legislative Assembly recognize the commitments that have been made to the steelworkers of Cisco, who remain without an adequate pension for the years of employment with this former Crown Corporation, and call upon the Premier and this government to finally deliver what was promised to them and what they truly deserve, an adequate settlement.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? Here, no. Notice is tabled. Honourable member for Colchester, Muscat-Albert Valley.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Halifax International Airport is staying in the forefront of security and technology across Canada with upgrades at its international airport. Whereas the present $90 million expansion underway at Halifax International includes upgrades at the South End departure terminal, where 2 baggage systems are being installed, both capable of handling 1,200 bags of luggage an hour.
And whereas other upgrades involve a new passenger holding room and new passenger walkway, along with 3 more jet bridges and common self-serve automated boarding pass cubicles. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House recognize the tremendous work ethic of the Halifax International Airport Authority's board members and all workers at the airport, continually striving to make your air travel safe and worry-free. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Youth Links was created to encourage students to communicate with their counterparts in other regions of Canada and around the world in order to promote understanding and respect. And whereas Youth Link provides a means for students to collaborate on projects of common importance. And whereas in May 2005, a group of students from Sackville High took a trip to Alberta for the annual Youth Link Summit titled The Meetings of Culture. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this legislature congratulate Krista Ramosip, Ryan McNamara, Mitchell Anderson, Callie Babin, Gillian Fung, Sydney Comstock, and teacher advisor Kenrick LeBlanc on a job well done representing Sackville High and the community of Sackville at the Youth Link Summit in Lethbridge, Alberta. Mr. Speaker, I request a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Royal Canadian Legion Branch 148 in Clacks Harbour will be holding a supper tomorrow evening to honour all local veterans. And whereas the dinner is being hosted by the town of Clacks Harbour in this, the year of the veteran. And whereas on August 15, 1945, 6 years of war ended and the Second World War was over and Canada was ready to welcome its heroes home. Therefore, it be resolved that all members of this House congratulate Mayor Lee Stoddard and Town Council members of Clacks Harbour for showing their genuine interest in wanting to give thanks to local veterans in and around the area of Clacks Harbour at Friday evening's dinner. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the construction of the new Western Region HRM High School is much appreciated by the communities served by the current Sir John A. Macdonald High School in Ubly, and whereas current students, graduates, and teachers want the new high school to be known as Sir John A. Macdonald High School, and whereas we are proud of the traditions of Sir John A. and wish to keep them alive, therefore be it resolved that the House of Assembly urge the Halifax Regional School Board to name the new Western Region High School Sir John A. Macdonald High School. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to do this resolution for the honourable member for Cumberland South. Mr. Speaker, I give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the House of Commons in Ottawa has been faithfully served by its clerk, Bill Corbett, who has announced his retirement. And whereas Audrey O'Brien, who has held several positions with the office of the clerk, has been chosen as clerk of the House of Commons. And whereas Audrey is the first female ever to hold that position, therefore be it resolved that this House do congratulate Audrey O'Brien on her new appointment and wish Bill Corbett happiness in a well-deserved retirement. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Which waivers are agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in April and July 2005, the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities published significant reports on the funding of municipal services. And whereas the main report recommended fundamental principles for the province's municipal equalization program to ensure that municipal services meet acceptable standards and are fairly funded. And whereas delegates at the recent conference of the UNSM have supported the effort to gain a fair, principled municipal equalization program to ensure that municipalities provide good local services without unduly high property taxes, therefore be it resolved that this House encourages the government to use the UNSM reports as the basis for negotiating a new municipal equalization formula and new standards for local services so that Nova Scotians do not suffer unduly high taxes or unduly poor local services. And Mr. Speaker, I'd request waiver and pass without debate.
Waivers agreed. Here are several noes. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas back on May 2nd, 1955, a public meeting was called in Waverley to discuss different scenarios of providing fire protection to the community. Whereas it was agreed at this meeting that fire protection was a must and efforts began to organize a volunteer fire department. And whereas today, 50 years later, the service has expanded and encompasses the greater Waverley area, with Waverley Fire Chief Ron Drumpel being the 10th fire chief in the department's history, with a firefighting force of 27 members, who continue to provide rock-solid emergency fire suppression efforts while also answering other emergency calls wherever and whenever needed. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House applaud the significant community spirit exemplified by members of the Waverley Fire Department while extending our best wishes to Chief Drumpel and all Fire Department members on the 50th anniversary. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers that agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Eastern Passage Cow Bay has a strong tradition of excellent athletic teams and has become a formidable force in minor baseball in Nova Scotia. Whereas at the recent Nova Scotia Provincial Championships, Eastern Passage Cow Bay Intermediate League team won the provincial title in their division. Whereas the team is made up of dedicated players who have played baseball together from an early age. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate the Eastern Passage Cow Bay Intermediate Minor Baseball team for winning this year's provincial championship and thank the dedicated volunteers Bernadette Angle, Steve Angle, and Cindy Harrison for their ongoing support. And I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Fultz House Corner Restoration Society held its annual dinner on October 5th, 2005, where they honored the region's veterans who served in both World Wars, the Korean conflict, and the Gulf War. And whereas in this, the year of the veteran, it is that much more important to remember those who sacrificed so much to allow us the freedoms we now enjoy. And whereas this event was a huge success with participation and a wonderful meal, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating the Fultz House Corner Restoration Society for their Veterans Recognition Night and for all the good work Fultz House does in the community of Sackville. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers that agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Youth in Care newsletter project provides youth who are in the care of the minister with the opportunity for self-enriched communications, education, and the means to make connections with their peers and the community at large. Whereas we were all presented with a copy of The Voice, which is full of heartfelt stories and poems, and where there is still no sustained funding for the progress in life's fourth year, and they can only afford to publish The Voice once per year, although there is interest and need in a full-time program. Therefore, be resolved that the government provide appropriate sustainable funding for the Youth in Care newsletter project so that young people in care can continue to benefit from this wonderful program. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver, notice, and passes without debate.
Question for waiver here, no. The notice is tabled. The honourable member for Halifax Shabukto.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Halifax Regional School Board plans to construct one amalgamated high school for the Halifax Peninsula, and whereas the site of the new high school is to be that of the former Community College campus on Bell Road, and whereas the current projected date for occupancy of the new high school is September of 2007, therefore be it resolved that the Department of Education work closely in cooperation with the school board to ensure that the new Halifax Peninsula High School is ready for occupancy no later than the start of the school year in 2007. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice, passage without debate.
Question for waivers that agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable the Deputy Premier.
Yes, Mr. Premier, I hereby give Mr. Speaker.
I hereby give notice on a future day. I shall move adoption of the following resolution.
A little premature there, sir, but it's okay. Premier, very wise man.
Whereas the town of Windsor and its famed pumpkin regatta was shown in a lengthy television feature across North America this morning on the Martha Stewart Show, and whereas despite being storm-stayed in Bar Harbor, Maine on Sunday morning, one of Stewart's television production personnel replaced her in the regatta race, which was given heavy coverage on the television show, as were interviews with Danny Dill and three-time regatta champion Leo Swinnemer. And whereas the free television coverage on such an international level can do nothing but boost the worldwide tourism potential for Windsor, the little town of big firsts, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House commend Danny Dill and Vanessa Roberts, the town of Windsor's Economic Development Officer, and all others involved for their diligent work in putting Windsor in the international spotlight in the past 10 days. And Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and pass without debate.
Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas licensed early learning child care centres in Nova Scotia continue to struggle with increasing costs and inadequate subsidy rates, and whereas a recent Freedom of Information request revealed that over half of the province's daycare centres failed their annual inspections and were given conditional licenses, and whereas with the ever-growing costs of insurance, heat, electricity, and supplies, the number of childcare spaces in this province continues to be placed in jeopardy by this government's lack of a long-term plan for accessible and affordable childcare. Therefore, be it resolved that the Minister of Community Services act on international research and experts in the early childhood education field and put measures in place to create a properly funded, sustainable, quality early childhood care and learning system in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waiver here, no. Notice is tabled. Order, please. Call upon the Premier for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to introduce to the House a group of extraordinary young Nova Scotians who are in the gallery opposite today. We are joined by members of Team Nova Scotia who attended the 2005 Canada Summer Games in Regina this past August. The group is here today representing their 430-member team, which brought a total of 46 medals home to Nova Scotia. We have invited them here today to recognize their personal achievements and to thank them for their dedication to sport, to healthy living, and to their province. These athletes and coaches have displayed tremendous athleticism, sportsmanship, and leadership at the Games and represented our province with commitment and strength. It is an honor to be able to thank so many of them personally here today. Behind every great athlete is a great coach, manager, and supportive parents and families who are also here today to be recognized for their tireless efforts. We are joined as well by the flag bearers and the mostly volunteer mission staff who worked diligently night and day to make things as smooth as possible for the team while they were in Regina. These athletes are the type of young citizens who will continue to teach and inspire others in their communities to do their best and help others achieve their own goals. And we, in turn, will continue to encourage and support these fine individuals to continue to do their best. With the success of these athletes and the feelings that they inspire in all of us to work harder, we are making steps toward a healthier and more active province. Team Nova Scotia has had the experience of a lifetime, and we were there cheering them along every step of the way. Nova Scotians are proud of this team. Ultimately, the games were an opportunity for our athletes to learn and to grow. They learned how to handle themselves under pressure. They learned how to hold their heads high, knowing that they did their best regardless of the outcome. And they are growing more confident in themselves as they set and achieve their goals. To the athletes, be proud of the fact that you are an inspiration to other youth across the province as they work toward their dreams and their goals. Vince Lombardi said, "The difference between a successful person and others is not a lack of strength, not a lack of knowledge, but rather a lack of will." Thank you for having the courage of conviction, the will to make such a great success of yourself, and in turn, to make our province and your country proud. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Health Promotion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased just to say a few words in my role through health promotion. And I too would like to welcome our athletes and our family members and our coaches and our managers and our members of our mission staff, and if there are any members as well from the Canada Games Management Group. And we are very proud, Mr. Speaker, what our athletes have done and what they have accomplished for our province. Indeed, they have worked hard to go to the games, to get there, and their dedication and perseverance is evident in the fact that they have come home with so many medals. But we are equally as proud, Mr. Speaker, of all the athletes who have worked so hard for so many years and have been so dedicated to whatever their particular sport is. And Mr. Speaker, as Minister of Health Promotion, I want to thank the members of the mission staff and many others for their dedication to the Canada Games athletes and for what they have done as well for our province. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Recognize the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join with the Premier and with the Minister in congratulating the young athletes who are in the House today. The truth of the matter is that it's the culmination of a lot of time spent training, a lot of time when you're really with yourself perfecting the skill at your particular endeavor. So the dedication and training that goes into the individual sports by these athletes is not only commendable, but it's something that will strengthen their character for their lives, Mr. Speaker. And I know that it's not just the athletes, that it's the coaches, it's the managers, it is the parents who work so hard to support them. And I know that over and above just undertaking the training that they have to take, that many of them are out raising money to support their sports and their teams and their clubs. And that all of that just goes to the tremendous dedication that they have to be the best at their particular endeavor. So on behalf of our caucus, we want to extend our congratulations and thank them for their great showing. Thank you.
Thank you. Recognize the Honourable Member for Richmond.
Speaker, on behalf of our leader, Francis McKenzie, my entire caucus, and our critic for sport and recreation, the member from Clare, it's with great pleasure that on behalf of the Liberal caucus, we too extend our sincerest congratulations to all of the athletes of the 2005 Canada Summer Games that represented Nova Scotia in the recent competition in Regina. As has been said, the dedication and the hard work that it takes to be able to be selected to represent the province is something that all of the athletes should be proud of. And we certainly want to take this opportunity to also thank the managers, the coaches, and the volunteers who work so hard to put together such a impressive team every year on behalf of Nova Scotia, and certainly want to commend the family members of each of the athletes who certainly are always there to support their children who are selected for these important games. 46 medals is something our province can be proud of, and each of the athletes stands as a model for your friends and your colleagues to show that hard work does pay off, and certainly the recognition of being able to say that you represented your province at these national games. À tous les athlètes, les entraîneurs, les bénévoles et les membres de famille des athlètes, je veux prendre cette occasion pour vous féliciter. Vous nous avez bien représentés aux Jeux et nous sommes très fiers de vos efforts. Merci encore. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. We certainly welcome our special guest to gallery today. I believe we have two more resolutions, and then another notice, and then the House will take about a 20-minute break so that all members can go outside to the Red Room and meet with our special guests and give them an opportunity to meet with the members as well. So, the honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canada Games provides a positive environment that offers fulfillment, cultivates new friendships, and fosters leadership through development in sports, and whereas the competitive sports brings out the best in athletic achievement, both individually or working together as a team, and whereas in this competitive environment of athletic success is achieved through passion, commitment to sport, and Jenna Marks proved this by winning the silver in the women's C2 1000 and the bronze in the women's C1 200. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly show their appreciation of Jenna Marks' outstanding athletic performance on behalf of all Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers are agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canada Games gives our athletes the opportunity to demonstrate the very best Nova Scotia has to offer. Whereas Team Nova Scotia's athletes won 46 medals over the 2-week competition in August. Whereas Special Olympian Krista Stockman of Bridgewater won 3 medals in women's swimming. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate all medal recipients for their excellent performance at the Games. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the following resolution. Whereas Beachville native and Sir Johnny Macdonald High School graduate Wayne Hamilton has been appointed the first Chief Executive Officer of the Office of African Nova Scotian Affairs, and whereas Mr. Hamilton has a long and distinguished list of accomplishments in the service of his community, his province, and his country, and whereas Wayne Hamilton will provide valuable leadership in this new position, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulate Wayne Hamilton on his appointment as the first Chief Executive Officer of the Office of Nova Scotian Affairs. I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Before we go to orders today, I'll call upon the honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby serve notice as per Section 43(2) for the request for this House to entertain an emergency debate. I move that the business of the House be set aside for the purpose of discussing a matter of urgent public importance. The matter is as follows. Mr. Speaker, soaring energy costs are the biggest issue facing Nova Scotia today. The impact of sky-high energy costs is being felt throughout the economy as we speak. Just last month, Statistics Canada reported that 6,000 Nova Scotians lost their jobs, mostly in the retail and wholesale sector. The high cost of gasoline and heating fuel is being felt by all Nova Scotians, and higher prices for virtually all consumer goods, including food and clothing. As transportation and manufacturing costs rise, so will the price to consumers. Nova Scotians are facing bleak prospects this winter as they choose between heating their home,
driving their cars, or putting food on their tables. As Nova Scotians make these unpalatable choices, there will be fewer dollars available to spend in retail as the Christmas season approaches. As winter progresses, the impact of high energy costs will also mean a great expense to government. The already razor-thin surplus will be in jeopardy due to the higher costs to run school boards, universities, and district health authorities. The cost of infrastructure projects will rise with higher transportation costs and for materials like asphalt. Community services will be overwhelmed with new cases as those on the margins are forced onto public assistance. Education of our children and the health of our families cannot and must not be compromised by the impact of rising energy costs. Higher transportation costs for Nova Scotia lobster this winter will greatly impact the winter lobster fisheries in southern Nova Scotia. Projecting out to next summer, Nova Scotians and North Americans will have very little money left at their disposal for leisure travel, which will have a devastating effect on our tourism sector. We believe, Mr. Speaker, that government has not fully explored the long-term ramifications of this energy crisis. Mr. Speaker, Section 43, subsection 4A of the Rules and Forms of Procedure of the House of Assembly states that the Speaker shall have regard to the probability of the matter being debated by the House within a reasonable time by other means. The size, scope, and urgency of this crisis dictates that the time for debate is now. Given the extent of the problem, Mr. Speaker, there is no other forum within the daily routine or through the course of ordinary debate that can convey the magnitude of this problem. Mr. Speaker, I therefore urge that you and all members support this request. Thank you.
Thank you. According to Rule 43, a request for emergency debate has to be submitted to the Speaker's office 2 hours prior to resumption of the House, which was done today. As well, I have determined that the issue that's being requested to be debated this evening is proper to be discussed and within the scope of ministerial action. I'm asking now if the House gives leave to the member for his request at this time for the debate. Is it agreed? Agreed. The emergency debate will take place at the time of adjournment, which is at 6 p.m. this evening for 2 hours. I'll ask that a schedule be drawn up for members, maximum 15 minutes each, and we will resume debate on that at 6 p.m. Order, please, all member. Cape Breton South.
Waive the late debate as a result of this.
Thank you. So it'll be a 2-hour emergency debate at 6 p.m. The House will now recess until approximately 4:10 for the members to allow to go out and meet with our special guest. So the House will resume at 4:10 for question period. Thank you.